Right. Welcome back, TLCers. Happy New Year, everybody. We're going to get started at conversation number 56 with June Dershewitz. She's going to talk to us today about why data is important and what we're going to do with it next. So if you don't know June, you've missed out. She is a data leader at a large tech company, analytics leader with client side and consulting background with really deep knowledge in both marketing and product analytics. She's known as an angel investor, global industry board experience, but Tim Wilson shared this little fun fact. About 20 years ago, June had a conversation with Eric Peterson that led to the creation of what we all know and love as Web Analytics Wednesday. And the Columbus version is celebrating 15 years this year. So thank you, June, for the impact that you've had on the industry and, helping all of our careers get just a little bit better. So I'm going to pass the screen share to you so that we can get started. That's
Great.
not how to do that. Stop share. There we go.
And I'll start share. Thank you so much, Kelly, for that warm welcome. It's I guess Web Analytics Wednesday is my magnum opus. Just crazy. So I'm really glad to get to present and share knowledge here with you today. Kelly already went through this, but just a few highlights from what I've done. I'm on the board of directors of the Digital Analytics Association. If you're not aware of that, it's a professional organization for data analysts and something I feel really passionate about. My day job is as a data leader at a large tech company headquartered in Seattle. I've been there for about 7 years, and I've specialized in media and entertainment. So I've worked in with games and with music. It's really fun, and I love my job. I have also more recently an angel investor in data startups. I love exploring technology and thinking about what's coming next. And overall, I've spent more than 20 years of basically my whole career working in data and analytics. In the early days, I was a data analyst and a data engineer. I spent 7 years in analytics consulting, and then I went into a period where I've been building and leading teams of people who do things like marketing analytics, product analytics, data engineering, data science, data governance, etc. And I've seen a lot of stuff. And I'm just really glad to get to share some of my stories here with you today. So what am I going to talk about today? I want to start out by telling you what I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about the struggle to convince executives that what you are doing with data is important. I'm not here to talk about digital transformation. I'm here to talk about just the basic assumption that the executives in your company are already sold on the value of data, and they have invested in it, and they are demanding results from your data team. I'm talking today about what happens next. That's the starting point. So now what? You've convinced the C-suite the data is important. Now what? The thing I'm going to share with you today is going to take the form of 5 stories about how to keep up with a business that is sold on the value of data and is demanding results from you. And it comes like this: organizing, innovating, prioritizing, influencing, and measuring. Those are my 5 stories. So let's get started. Organizing. Lessons learned about data org structure. So first of all, what's the challenge here? The challenge is, as a data team gets larger, it's going to develop pockets of specialized expertise, right? When you're super small, you have a few people and they're wearing all the hats, but as you grow, you develop areas of specialization. And when you get to that state, how do you fit all those pieces together? That's the challenge. And the solution, I think, if it works for you, take a centralized approach. Have a chief data officer, have groups that are reporting into that function that that represent all that your company is doing with and needs from data. But there are multiple ways to look at this, and ultimately you should be striving for something that helps your business and your customers the most. And that's the structure that's most sensible. Also, as a caveat, it's a moving target. It's not something that you just set and it works and it's done. So it's going to evolve over time, and you have to keep scrutinizing it and inspecting it to make sure that the model that you've got still works for the business that you support. Let me give you some examples. Here's one. This is a centralized approach that I mentioned earlier. So you have a chief data officer, and then this is the most super simplified view. It never looks just like this, but I would say that these three core functions here are always going to be present in your model. Marketing analytics, product analytics, and data infrastructure or data platform. Depending on the company that you have, you might have other ones that are like content analytics or sales analytics or something else. But I would venture to guess that you're always going to have marketing analytics, product analytics, and data infrastructure. In this centralized view, all these three functions, these teams of people, are rolling up to a chief data officer who represents the analytics and data science needs of the entire business. I think this works well. Here's another approach. This one, there is no chief data officer, but instead you have a marketing analytics team that's reporting up to their main stakeholder group, which is represented by the CMO. You have a product analytics team that's rolling up to, say, the chief product officer or chief product officer, and then data infrastructure and data platform will roll up to the chief technology officer, right? And this one can work well too. The advantages and disadvantages of each model. If you are reporting up to your main stakeholders, you are certainly closer to the business, which is extremely important. Although you may have to work a little bit harder to share knowledge and practices across these three different functions, which I see as one of the main benefits of taking the centralized approach, right? If you see something that's a common thread that crosses marketing analytics and product analytics, if you're all in the same org together, you're better positioned to be able to help each other out and do things efficiently. I'm going to show you one other model. This is a bad one. I don't recommend it, but I see it in the wild, so I feel like I ought to mention it. And it looks like this, right? There is no center. And instead, you don't even have groups of people. You have individuals. You have an analyst or two reporting up to a marketer. The marketer is their stakeholder, but they're like their immediate stakeholder. And then maybe you have another marketer, and the marketer doesn't have any analyst and has to beg and borrow from others. And then you have another marketer who has their own analyst who's not in the same group as the other analyst, right? And those people all report up to the CMO, but the CMO doesn't necessarily have visibility in what the analysts are doing. This is not good. Hopefully, if you see this, it's a transitional state to one of these other models. It's more intentional, that works better. Yep, and that's all I'm going to, and thus ends my rant about data org structures. Next, I'm going to talk about innovating. Can you run hackathons for data people? I think you can. I think you should. And in a place where you've already convinced your leaders that data is important, I think this is an important thing to do. So here's what I mean. Here's the challenge. If you've got a demanding business, you really have to defend your time for the important things that everybody's going to want, nobody's going to ask for. Things that are going to inspire creativity in your analytics team, things that are going to help your data people build new skills, things that are going to allow you to reduce the technical debt that that you are certainly accruing if you're moving quickly. So how do you do this? And I would say one way to do this is to reserve the time, your time and energy, your team's time and energy to run data hackathons. But this is only going to work, I think, if you've got at least 20 data people at your company, right? I know that there are hackathons that happen publicly where people come together from all over the place to combine forces and quickly produce fun results. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about doing it inside a single company. And even if you've got that and you're doing that at your company, I think it only especially works if your executives notice and care about what you're doing and the results of the time that you're spending on your hackathons. So let me get a little more specific here by describing a few different types of hackathons that I believe are possible. I have 3 ideas. My first idea is Iron Viz. If you've ever been to a Tableau conference, you've seen this sort of thing where there's a data set that people receive, and then they very quickly go and build beautiful and functional data visualizations on top of this data set, and then they compete for prizes, right? The second idea, pick one big problem and solve it quickly as a group. So for example, maybe there's one particular area where there's just like this huge backlog of SQL that needs to get written. And you have one poor analyst who's responsible for going through and doing that serially one by one on their own. It's going to take them for months. If you can get people together in a room or a virtual room to spend an 8-hour day just sort of dividing and conquering and powering through the task at hand, you can move really quickly to get things done and get it out of the way. This also, I think, works with things like documentation. You know, I'm sure that where you're at, there might be some documentation that needs to be refreshed, and it's always kind of at the bottom of the list. Get everybody together, do it quickly, get it out of the way. And finally, my third idea, and this is kind of my favorite one, where you pick a theme that's important to the business and important to your data team, and then you form teams of a few people each with different skill sets, like get, you know, a data engineer and a data analyst and a data scientist and maybe a product person all together. And then you very quickly, maybe just in a 24-hour window of time, build prototype solutions around that theme, and then you compete, right? And the theme, you know, it might be like self-service, or it might be customer acquisition, or whatever, but just getting people to think creatively about like one thing that actually is a business challenge for you, to quickly make some progress on it in a fun way. Oh, and here, making hackathons actually count and matter. And I was just mentioning this in the themes, but connecting hackathon themes to your business goals is an important thing to do, to make sure that you're spending your time working towards something that's going to be valued. And then next, these are just a great excuse to showcase winners and winning ideas really broadly through your company. Everybody always loves to receive kudos and accolades, and this gives you input for that. Trophies. And then finally, one of the problems with hackathons, I think, is that they can be kind of ephemeral. You say, okay, we're going to go and we're going to do this thing, and you do it, and then you go back to your normal job and you forget it ever happened. But one way that you can overcome that and carry is by carrying hackathon results forward into your team's goals. So say that you know, you had a bunch of teams, they had all these proof of concepts, you came up with 3 winners, and maybe take those 3 winners and say, oh, how can we carry these forward into something that we're going to execute on over the next 6 months or the next year, because we've already proven that there's like the seed of a really good idea here. And so if you're thinking about, oh, I might actually want to run a hackathon for my team, a good time of year, I think, to do that is maybe in Q4, when you're just getting ready to set your goals for the next year. Run hackathons to fuel innovation for things that ought to make their way into your goals. Okay, now let's talk about prioritizing. This is always the struggle. Like, how do you make sure that you're doing the right things? So that the challenge is, and I'm sure we all face this, I know I do right now, there are never enough hours in the day to do it all. There is a lot to do, and you shouldn't actually say yes to everything. You can't. There aren't enough hours in the day, but you shouldn't. So how do you make the most of what you got? How do you know what's the right thing to work on? I have a number of solutions for this. It's a very common problem. There's lots of ideas for ways to combat it. One is to set guiding principles that will help you and the rest of your team make smart decisions about how you prioritize, and I'll get more into that in a bit. Another one is set up a scoring model. Here's one idea: impact, confidence, and ease. ICE scoring. I'll talk you through an example also. And then another thing that I think can work really well is whatever methods that you're choosing, do it collaboratively with the people at the receiving end. Like, the more visibility that your customers have into the way that you prioritize, the more they'll be comfortable with what you've chosen to do and to not do. But sometimes you have to say yes anyway. It depends on who's asking. If the CEO says, I need this thing and I need it tomorrow, you might have to say yes. So don't say, oh, let me pull out my scoring model. Let's talk about guiding principles a little more. Common complaint. I don't know, data team, how you're prioritizing. How do you decide what you're going to work on and what you're not? I can't tell. So, work on, seeing if that's a problem in your business and work toward addressing it. One thing that can really help with this is to publish and share your team's beliefs about how you prioritize. How exactly you do this will depend on your own company culture. Maybe it makes sense for you to put something like this on a wiki, or maybe it goes as a slide in your strategy decks or whatever. But just making sure that they're there somewhere and they're accessible for people who want to know will help. As an example of guiding principles that you might set for how you think about prioritizing data work, these are just a few ideas to get you started, but you might choose to prioritize something that carries a high business risk, like compliance work. This is how you justify putting that as a priority. You might choose to prioritize things that are directly linked to business goals. And again, especially relevant as I am giving this talk in what is goal setting season for many of us. What does your business value? What are they looking to achieve this year? And then when you are working with your business stakeholders on the things that will go into your analytics and data science roadmap for the year, how are those things directly linked to the things that wind up being the big business goals? Make sure you know. And then my final example here is you might choose to prioritize things that are directly linked to improving the customer experience, not just what you're doing for the people who are your business partners within your own company, but doing things that benefit the end users of the customers of whatever it is that your business is about. Let's talk about ICE scores for a minute. Impact times confidence times ease is an ICE score in my mind. And so what you do is you take impact, you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Confidence, scale of 1 to 10. Ease, scale of 1 to 10. And then you multiply them out, you get an ICE score. You can use it for prioritizing. Here's an example. Say that you got some number of ideas. And since this is a TLC, maybe these are experiments you could run, or maybe for your different group, maybe these are like customer scoring models you could build, or dashboards that you could create or something. But just for the sake of this talk, let's say there are experiments you could run. So the first experiment, you look at it and you're like, it's a kind of a low impact thing. If we do it, it's not really going to make a huge difference. But on the other hand, we're really confident in it, like we understand it, really well, and we're pretty sure that we could achieve that impact. And it's super easy to do, right? So this one is 1 times 10 times 10 has a high score of 100. Second experiment you could run, incredibly high impact. right? Like if you do this, you're just going to knock it out of the park. You're going to make like a huge difference in the business, but you're not at all confident that you could achieve it. It's a big maybe, and it's incredibly hard to do, right? So in this one, the I score is 10 times 1 times 1 is 10. And then the third experiment you could run is kind of medium level impact. If you do it, it would, be like a medium sized win. You're kind of confident that you could do it. And it's super easy to do. So this one, this example is 5 times 5 times 10 is 250. So if you look down on the I-score column, you can see that the third experiment is the one that rises to the top, is the one with the highest I-score. And so if you were looking to prioritize all the things that you could do, you can use I-scores to sort that out. What are they good for? It is quick and easy. I just walked you through that example in like 2 minutes. And so it's easy to explain to other people. But there are drawbacks. It's totally imprecise. The way that I would rate something, may be different than the way that you would rate something, and it's imperfect. There are ways to get around this, though. I think if you're prioritizing, like regularly prioritizing in similar sets of things like experiments, you might be able to come up with a scoring rubric that allows different people to come up with comparable scores when they go through and do them on their own repeatedly. So what was it good for? I think it's good for narrowing things down when you've got a big list of ideas that you could work on, like experiments or dashboards or whatever. So hopefully this is useful to you. Maybe you're already using it. Maybe you're thinking about using it. Maybe you're using rice or like some other variation of it, but this is just one idea. Let's talk about influencing. I think influence is a really important but underrated skill for data people. I do. And I'm talking about influencing without authority, which is the ability to influence other people without having any power over them. You don't have to be the most senior person in the room to have influence. You don't have to be the VP. Anybody can do this. So when do you use it? I think influence without authority can be incredibly helpful when you're entering a new situation, like there's a reorg and you're working with a new group of people, or you have a new business stakeholder group, or there's going to be a new product in your company, or also my favorite, and I'll talk more about this, during a time of conflict. When you're at a disagreement, influence can be really helpful. And the key to getting it right with influence out the other end, especially out the other end of a conflict, everybody feels like they're a winner, right? No bad feelings. Let's talk a little more about conflicts. I think conflicts can happen all the time, especially happen when you're working on something that's high visibility and high stakes. Like if you've already convinced your leaders that data is important and everybody is really valuing it, chances are they're going to have strong opinions about it. Sometimes those strong opinions are going to cause problems. This list was super long, but in the interest of time, I've reduced it down to my favorite 3. The first one on my list is the classic urgent reprioritization. I walked you through earlier all these different tactics that you could use to prioritize the work that your team is doing, but sometimes still run into conflict. And there's this struggle, right, where you have you've got like your proactive roadmap of all the things that your team is going to be working on for the year, and then somebody swoops in and is like, can you just do this thing for me? Right. And so I think the way to solve this, or even, as a preventative measure, is to have and to make sure that people know about clear prioritization principles that your team uses to do work. And maybe you shouldn't, if someone swoops in from the side with something that's ad hoc and it actually, according to your prioritization principles, is a more valuable thing for your team to burn their team time on right now, you should take that, but using prioritization principles will help. Second type of conflict, resourcing issue. I see this tend to happen when you have small groups of people working together collaboratively to execute on something. And sometimes there are these skill boundaries, especially in larger companies, where there may be some conflict when it comes to not having people who are precisely skilled in the thing that needs to get done on a project. So common example of this would be you have maybe a long-term data science project and you have a scientist who's leading that, but they might be asked to create a dashboard as part of that. And they're like, wait, I can do that, but but my dashboarding skills really stink. Can we get a data analyst to do that at a higher level of quality and faster? Okay. Or it might be a data analyst who's leading some project and they need to build some data pipelines. And I'll say, well, data analysts can build the pipelines, but they're going to do a really hacky job of it. And they're going to create something that's frail because they're not well versed in software engineering best practices. Well, maybe they need a data engineer, So there's this struggle. Do you work with the staff members that you've got at your disposal now, or do you advocate for getting more specialized skills? And I think a way to solve for this is to advocate for multidisciplinary teams. There's always, when you're starting out, you have to prove that you can do a thing with limited resources, but eventually you need to make sure you have the right people doing the right job. And if you don't, you're going to run into conflict. So multidisciplinary teams. Third and final example of conflict in analytics, consensus on responsibilities. Who's doing what? Who's responsible for what? There are some things that people really want to lean into to say they're doing, they're owning, and there are other things that everybody steps back from like a hot potato. And I see this come up always and forever in instrumentation work, tracking new interactions that occur in your product or your app or your website or whatever. So you might typically, I would say this involves, a couple of different teams. You might have like a data platform person, and you might have more of a business facing data analyst person. And then maybe you have someone who's like a software engineer who represents the mobile app that you're trying to get something instrumented in or whatever. And if something goes wrong, then everybody's like, oh, that's yours, it's not mine. And that can create conflict, right? So one way to solve for this is to have a RACI matrix that describes the responsibilities of different parties involved in a thing. RACI stands for, if you don't know, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And that has, it has rows for each of the main tasks or work streams that happened commonly in a project like instrumentation, and then columns for either individuals or groups involved, and specifies clearly the way that each party is expected to be involved in the thing at any given stage. And if you work on that jointly with all the people who are involved, and you come to a shared understanding of what those responsibilities are, it can help you avoid this kind of conflict. It's been useful for me. Last, I'm going to talk about measuring. How do you quantify the quants? How do you know that what you're doing is having the impact that you want? And by the way, I'll say I'm brewing a new talk that's all about proving the ROI of analytics. That's like a massive expansion on this topic, but this is the tiniest little bit of that. So what's the challenge? You do a lot of stuff. How do you know whether it's paying off? How do you know what's the ROI of it? There are many ways to approach this. You can run surveys to get qualitative information. You can detail out all of the insights that you delivered and how those insights have been acted upon. You can attempt to calculate business ROI directly, although sometimes it takes a leap of faith to get from the work that you are doing as a data person or a data team directly to, business outcomes in terms of ROI that you would trust. You could count the number of active users of the data tools that you have. If you have super important dashboards, how many people are actually using the things that you produce and maintain. However, I will say that each of the things that I've laid out as potential solutions here, none of these are a whole lot of work actually, but it does take persistence, because you can't, this isn't just like a snapshot in time. You do it once and you're like, so there, we did it. You need to measure it and continue to measure it and have a feedback loop for continuous improvement. What's working, what's not working, what can we improve now, what should we fix, and to have a cadence of kind of regular inspection of that. And as one of the things I've said in this talk, it's inspection jointly with your business stakeholders, with your customers. Is this working? Is it not? But let's just talk a little bit more about surveys. This is one of my favorite ways to measure. When you are setting out to design a survey to measure the effectiveness of a data team, match the questions that you have to your team's vision. There's not one magical survey that I can say, just use this and it's going to work for you. When you have your team's vision established, there should be some specification in there about of what you stand for. And that's the kind of thing that ought to go into your survey. So say that your team's vision is centered around insight generation. It's delivering insights that the business uses. And these are the kinds of questions that you could ask in your survey. You could ask about agreement with the statement, my analyst comes to me proactively with insights. Proactivity, if that's important for your team, measure that. My analyst's work often forms the basis for decisions and actions. Actionability. If your analyst is delivering insights, but the business isn't doing anything with the insights that get delivered, then that's not successful, right? And so here's at least a qualitative way to get at that. On the other hand, say that your team's vision has to do with self-service enablement. These are the kinds of questions that you might want to ask. You could ask, and by the way, the people at the receiving end of these surveys are, like your internal stakeholder group. If it's self-service and you are enabling self-service for your entire business, the survey goes out to everyone in your business, right? These survey questions are agreement with the statement, I have the data support I need to do my job effectively. Anyone in the business, how much do they agree with that? Agreement with the statement, I'm able to get data in a time frame that meets my business need. If people need it at a certain time, if it's too late, it's not useful, they'll tell you if they're getting it fast enough. And so my advice is to set this kind of thing up, run it regularly over time, set targets for where you want to be, and make sure that the leaders of your business stakeholder groups know what these targets are and can follow your journey. Those are my 5 stories. I just wanted to leave you with a few resources at the end if you're interested in some of the material that I've talked about here. The Digital Analytics Association, if you're not familiar with it, please check it out. If you want to learn more about how people are approaching shapes of data organizations, there's this great doc that has lots of examples of different ways that companies are shaping their data teams. Difference between marketing analytics and product analytics. I didn't really get into this in this talk, but I've worked on variously on both sides of that. I'm currently in product analytics, but who knows? And there's some neat blogs on that. ICE scoring, RACES. Definitely invite you to dig deeper in either of those topics. And then if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, there I am. And awesome. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, June. All right, let's open it up to questions. So you all can use the TLC calls channel to ask questions, or take yourself off mute if you want to just chat with June direct, or if you want to use the chat link in the Zoom, and I'll copy it and put it over into the calls channels for folks to continue the conversation after. I see a couple of people typing, so we will hold for people to type.
Mm-hmm. Here, I'll put it back on this in case people want to take a screenshot.
Good call. And actually, since I have your deck over here, I
Oh,
will grab
yeah.
those links and I will paste them.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Abby asks, or shares, great presentation, thanks. I hadn't heard of Web Analytics Wednesdays.
What?
Would you like to see more about that?
Oh, could I say more about that? Well, I mean, I could tell you the super old origin story of it, which I've shared in other forums, but basically there was this Yahoo group in the ancient prehistoric days that I was a part of with some other people. And I was just feeling kind of lonely and I wanted to meet other people who did what I did, which at the time was web analytics. And I said, hey guys, anybody want to get together during happy hour next week in San Francisco? We could meet on Wednesday. And other people wrote back and they're like, yeah, let's meet. And then other people chimed in and said, hey, I'm not in San Francisco, but I want to meet with people in my city and whatever. And in that first month, I think we had events happen in 5 different cities or something. And then Eric Peterson, who was very heavily involved in the industry then, was like, hey, let's turn this into an ongoing thing. And he made a website for it. And he put some framework around it, and it ran very successfully for years and years. And that people were getting together on Wednesdays in cities around the world to talk about web analytics. I ran the one in San Francisco up until I was like almost 9 months pregnant with my daughter. Like, the irony of it was I was going and I was getting sponsors to buy drinks for these events, and I couldn't even drink the drinks that I was getting, which was fine. And then I handed it over to somebody else after my daughter was born, and my daughter's just about to turn 14. So this has been going on for a really long time. Oh my God. And it's still, I mean, I read about one recently that was happening in Copenhagen. So they're happening, and I'm just thrilled to have played a small role in the genesis of it. They don't happen in San Francisco anymore. I think like they're just isn't kind of the demonstrated need for that. But I think we're able to recreate that just to, bring people together to talk about things that are top of mind for us in data science and analytics in lots of different ways now. And it's easier. Like this happened before LinkedIn. So it was much harder to connect with the people who had a shared interest professionally. So anyway, that's what it was. Abby, I hope that was interesting to you.
That's right. And there are some cities that still hold it.
Yeah.
Columbus is really active, of course. That's Tim Wilson's baby. And there are other cities in various places that still hold them actively. So it depends on where you are. Dylan Lewis just shared a link in the TLC calls channel of where you can check and see if there's one near you.
Cool. Hi, Dylan.
Anybody else? Any questions? Oh, that was Abby saying thanks.
Oh, okay. Great.
So I have a question, if it's okay.
We will allow it, Melissa. How you doing?
So June, as far as managing expectations, managing executives, so you sell executives on the beauty and the wonder of analytics. And then you live in a world where you then have to get the analytics together, or you have small data problems, which I run into all the time. How do you keep them excited while also explaining that you can't give statistical significance on, say, something which happens 5 times a year?
I see.
How do you do that balance of, yes, you want to be data driven, you also need to understand the limitations of data driven.
When the data is telling you that maybe this thing that you want me to tell you about isn't actually that important, this thing that you think is super important isn't important, but I'm glad you're excited about the data.
Got it. I think it's the trick is about finding the opportunities where you can make yourself useful, right? Like, where is that match between what the data team is able to do today and the objectives of the business, and maybe it doesn't take the shape that they expect it to take, and you know when you bring it down to reality, you're like, we can't do that. you know but I think, like, making the distinction between things that may be possible in the future if your circumstances change, and the things that you can actually do today that are gonna, drive some actionability, and making sure that the work that you're doing is kind of split between those things.
Here's
Right.
what we can do with data. Here's what data can't do for you. It's not practical.
Yeah. So one of the problems that I face still is, like, we're doing things that, seem maybe kind of behind the scenes. And what our answer to all that is, well, it's foundational. It's foundational work. You have to do this work before we can do that other work. And it just leaves, I think, a bad feeling with the people at the receiving end who are funding our teams, who are like, what have you done for me lately? And so can you do a little tiny proof of concept and carry that all the way through, and then get like testimonials from the business stakeholders who have benefited from that to say it was good in this way, and to use that to sort of expand out to cover larger and larger areas over time.
Thank you.
Hey, I've got a few things I wanted to bring up, if that's all right.
Okay.
June, thanks for hopping on here. It's funny that you mentioned Web Analytics Wednesdays and sending an email out about getting a happy hour together, because in mid-November, I think you sent out an email to some new DAA members.
I did.
About getting together, and I was actually on the receiving end of that.
Oh.
But we went in the holidays, I got COVID, and didn't get a chance to reach back out. But it's great to hear that you've had a lot of experience around, like, product analytics and marketing analytics, and I'm excited to have this Amplitude article up. But I suppose maybe it's something we can get together and actually talk about in person a bit more. But, like, when an organization has kind of two different analytics initiatives going on, where from the marketing side, as well as the product team is trying to build up their analytics. Do you have any advice on how to help align those two teams, especially when they're, like, literally on opposite corners of the organization? So yeah.
That's the hardest thing. First of all, hi Grant. It's nice to meet you. Yes, I remember the email conversation we had. And now that you've got your health back, we should think about getting a meetup together in San Francisco. I'm up for that. But to attempt to answer your question, yeah, it can be a struggle. So if we go back, I'm going to go back all the way to the earlier part of my deck, where I was talking about org structure. The whole thing slowly. There we go. So, maybe you have where, like, the CMO owns the marketing analytics function and the chief product officer owns the product analytics function, but you have a disconnect between these teams. Like, the marketing analytics team has their own priorities and tools and way of operating, and the product analytics team has their own ways, and then sometimes they're in conflict with one another. And I don't want to say it's always a tools issue, but sometimes, like, that's one of the first things you can inspect to see whether there's a problem. Like, say the marketing analytics team centers around tool X to get all of that fuels all the insights that they provide, and the product has another tool Y that they're using.
They have different KPIs.
Oh yeah, that are at odds with one another. Oh, I hate when that happens. And so Yeah, and that can present problems. But I would say, like, even when they seem like they're at opposite corners of the universe, there's some point where there's an overlap. And I see that in talking about influence, there's an opportunity to collaborate, right? You can say like that's where the conflict is right now, but really that's where we need to come together to do things in a consistent way. And often I would say that's the growth, growth team, wherever the growth team lives in your organization. And since there are a bunch of experimentation people on the call, like that, if the goal of your experiment is acquisition, maybe it's going to live within marketing. But if the goal is engagement, maybe it lives within product. Or maybe you can't agree on what the goal of your experiment is, and it's fighting over like what wins and what loses, because one optimizes for acquisition and the other optimizes for engagement or something.
But at the end of the day, the goal of both teams should be the end user, the customer.
It should. But is it to get new customers, or is it to keep existing customers happy, or is it to increase overall revenue for the company, or
good point.
Yeah, so those conversations need to be happening. I don't want to always say, oh, it's a top-down thing and you should have this consortium of leaders who say like these are the success metrics that you use for all your experiments consistently. Like that, I think that's a good thing to strive for, but I've seen just how hard that can be. But I think actually the more companies that are more mature on this journey are able to achieve something like that, to say it's not like the success metric for every experiment is driven locally by the team that's running the experiment, but like we're doing what's good for the company.
Something shared. Yeah.
Was that helpful, Grant? Or
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, a lot to unpack there. Again, perhaps we can do a bit more in person if we can figure it out at time. So yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed the talk. Thanks, Judy.
Oh, gladly.
All right, I want to be cognizant of your very hard stop for the that you have in a few. So I'm going to ask everyone, if you still have questions for June, post them in the calls channel or anywhere else in the TLC. June is going to be monitoring and will engage to continue the conversation on the TLC. So, you'll be able to continue that conversation there. And I want to thank everybody, let you know that our next conversation in February will be with Matt Policastro. He's going to be talking to us about the next phase of the sequential planning calculator that was designed first by Merritt Aho. He's made some really great updates that are in beta that should be ready for prime time by the time that we get that scheduled. So you'll see that calendar invite coming very soon. It's pretty exciting. It's going to make it a lot easier to use. And if you don't recall, this is the sequential design that allows you to both plan and analyze a sequential design experiment. So really cool stuff coming. So first, thank you, June. Really appreciate you coming and sharing with us and the conversation. It was fabulous as always, and great to see you. And for those of you going to Super Week, see you at the end of January, early February in Budapest, and everyone else, see you next time. Thanks all.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, TLC.